Again, welcome to this webinar on data sufficiency. I think it's sufficient, but is it? Uh, Let me first of all start off by introducing myself. My name is Saqib, and I am the lead product manager at GMAT-Wiz. So basically, my job involves creating all the products GMAT related. And apart from that, I'm also a quant expert. I like teaching quant, and I've been in this edtech industry for about close to 10 years now. Okay. Now, as far as this webinar is concerned, I would like to tell you how I'm going to conduct this webinar. The webinar is basically broadly categorized into two parts. The first is a major part where I am going to talk about data sufficiency in general, what are the reasons why you falter. I'll take up a few questions and I'll ask you to solve them, and then I'll explain and tell you why are you faltering in those kind of questions. Okay, and that would take about 60 to 90 minutes depending on your pace. Okay, on the pace of the batch basically. And after that, once we are done with this, I have kept about 10 to 15 minutes at the end. For example, if you have any questions, it could be a general GMAT related question or quant related question. Any question that you have related to your preparation, feel free to ask them at the end of the webinar once we are done with all the part that is related to data sufficiency. Okay, so I hope this part is perfectly clear. So I'll without wasting any more time, what I'll do is I'll jump directly into the main part, and I'll start off by talking about why do students basically falter in DS questions. Okay, and before I give you the reasons that hey, these are the particular reasons why you might be faltering, I want you to give me your opinion or your experience. In your experience, when you falter in a question, in a data sufficiency question, what are the major reasons because of which you falter? And you can type in your response in the chat box. So let me know while solving data sufficiency question, what challenges do you face? And if you make a mistake, what according to you is the major reason because of which you make mistake? And there could be many reasons. You don't have to stick to one. If you think there are more than one, then feel free to put your responses in the chat box. What, according to you, is the reason because of which students falter in a data sufficiency question? And guys, I would want you to participate. It's okay if the answer is wrong. By the way, there's no wrong or right answer. Just give your opinion, and I'll let you know. Okay, Deepak says carrying on from statement one into another statement while independent assessment. Yes, Deepak, that's one of the problems. You're correct. Sometimes people end up using the information that is present in the first statement and while solving the second one without doing an independent assessment, without analyzing each statement independently is how I'll put it. But yes, you're correct. That's one of the problems. Anything else, guys? I'm sure you must have faced a lot of problems. I think this is a very common issue that I've seen among students. So feel free to chime in. Okay, Deepak says again, not leveraging the STEM. Yes, correct. If you're not reading properly, if you're not using all the information that is given in the question STEM, then that is another very big reason because of which you might falter in a data sufficiency questions. That's good. Sam says falling into C traps. Yes, I would say that is another reason. You fall in C traps. That's you falter. But why do you fall into C traps, Sam? What is the reason behind falling it? Be it any trap, be it a C trap or a D trap. Why do you think you fall for it? Do you do less analysis, or do you think that's a conceptual issue? What do you think is the issue because of which you fall for a trap? Okay, not taking clues from other statement. Okay. Not taking clues from other statement, I would say if you're looking for if you don't end up marking C as the answer, then I would say that could be a problem because if you're not taking clues from the other statement. But if the answer is either A or say D or a E, in that case, obviously, if you're falling for a C trap, that means you're not using the information properly. I'll talk about all the reasons, but I just want to understand yours. So far, Deepak and Sam, they have given their opinion. Anybody else who would want to come up with something? Okay, a very quick poll. How many of you have done data sufficiency questions? So please mark yes if you have done them at least once before attending this webinar. You have tried data sufficiency questions. So if you have tried them out, mark yes. Okay, Quentin says, fail to understand the question in most cases. Yes, I do agree with you. A lot of people make mistake if they fail to understand it. Okay. Okay, I can see 90% if you have done data sufficiency questions before. In fact, now the percentage is increasing. So I think there are only quite a few of you, one or two maybe, who haven't done data sufficiency. Okay, fine. So let me now tell you, I've got some ideas here, but let me now elaborate what, according to me, are the major reasons because of a student's falter. The first reason, which I think, and that's I think is the major reason and the most obvious reason is the lack of conceptual clarity. So what I mean by that is, and this is, by the way, valid for both a data sufficiency question as well as problem solving questions. If your concepts are not strong, okay, then there's a high chance that you might not understand what the question is talking about, or you might not be able to make the right inference, okay, or you might not even know what formula to use. So there's a high chance. Okay, now, and here's a sample example. So what I've done is I've taken a reason and I'm also showing a sample example. You don't need to solve it, but I'm just going to talk about why a lack of conceptual clarity may lead a student to make a mistake. So for example, this question is based on factors, as you can see, and here I'm talking about a common factor. Okay, now usually when people see a common factor, they jump and directly think about least common factor, or they don't even understand properly maybe what does just common factor mean. Do they mean least common factor, or do they mean something else? Greatest common factor, I should say greatest common divisor, or GCF, whatever I mean to say. Or are you talking about general factors? What factors are we talking about? That is not very clear. Okay, and if you don't know what does common factor in general mean, there's a high chance that you might falter in a question like this. Okay, and most of the questions that I've chosen are official ones. So just to put my point across, I'm not using any questions which I haven't come on either on the official guide or in the exam. Okay, so this kind of question do come. If you don't understand the meaning of factor, if you don't know how to work with factors, you will make a mistake. So it's not a problem of data sufficiency. It's a problem in general where the first thing and the foremost thing that you need to do is improve your conceptual clarity. Okay. Now let's talk about the second problem. The second problem, and I think Deepak mentioned, is the lack of thorough analysis. What do you mean by that? Is when you're given a question, a lot of people just read the question very quickly. Okay, so they will read it like this: if x and y are positive integers, is x into y even? And they'll jump directly into the statement without thinking even or pausing for a moment and even thinking, okay, is x into y even? So this is what kind of a question? Is this a yes no kind of a question, or a what is the value kind of question? What kind of a question is this? And if I'm looking for x into y is even, when is x into y even, and when is it not? Okay, so not thinking about these things and moving directly into jumping into the statements can lead to make a lot. You can end up making a lot of mistakes. Okay, and to avoid making such mistakes, there are certain things which we talk about in our webinars a lot. You'll see is that you should, and these are process related things, guys. So for example, the first thing that I talked about was conceptual clarity. If you want to be improved in these kind of things where you are able to analyze properly, then you need to learn how to make the inferences properly, how to look at the question and decide how to translate it. So for example, there are a lot of word problem questions where you need to create equations. A lot of people just read word problems questions really quickly, okay, without creating equations, and they make a lot of mistake in data sufficiency. So if you can sharpen your skills like simplification in geometry, you need to say, for example, improve on visualization. You need to be able to look at a diagram and make certain inferences based on the information given in the question, right? So long story short, if you want to improve in this area where you don't do a lot of analysis, I would say learn to sharpen your skills in these like visualization, simplification. And I'll talk about how you can do this. So don't worry, if that is your question in your mind, I'm going to cater to that also. Okay. Third, and I think this is a very common reason, especially when people are starting their GMAT prep, so, and they're looking at data sufficiency question for the first time. Okay, so what I've seen people do is, students do is that they look at the question, and because of the lack of thorough analysis, and and they don't want to do it. Basically, they just look at statements and think, hey, can I get the answer from this? Can I get the answer from this? It doesn't seem I can get it. So like, for example, if I solve this question, if you see what is the value of x, that's a question here, right? A lot of people will look at these two statements, and they'll say, okay, first statement not sufficient because I have two variables, one equation. They'll again say two variables, one equation, not sufficient. And they'll say, hey, I have two unique equations. And they'll end up marking the answer as C without analyzing each statement properly. Like whenever we solve these kind of questions, I keep on telling my students that, hey, make sure that you simplify both these statements and check whether both of them are unique or not. Don't just look and take a call whether they are unique or not. There's a high chance, and I would want you to maybe later on after this webinar, I would want you to try this out once. So if you want to take a screenshot, I'll share the PDF, by the way. But you'll see that the second equation is just a same equation as this one. You just need to simplify this a bit. The moment you simplify it, these two equations are the same. So the answer in this case is actually E, not C. So somebody was talking about a C trap, right? So Sam was talking about C trap, by the way. So understand, you fall for a C trap because of the first two reasons which I told you about. But one of the major reason is that you don't do the thorough analysis properly. You just look at stuff and try and think. That's not going to work. Don't just skim through the information and just look at it and say, hey, I don't think. The moment you just say, I don't think it's sufficient, that's wrong. You should always validate it before deciding whether the particular statement is sufficient or not. Okay. So another reason, the last, I think, the reason which I would say is, especially when you are solving questions in the exam, in the mocks or in a quiz, you're worried about time a lot. And this is, I'm sure, a very common question. Whenever I give a difficult question or a lengthy question, people end up asking me, hey, don't you think this question will take a lot of time? It will take me 3 minutes or 5 minutes. What should I do? And I think this is a thing that plays on your mind at somewhere at the back of your mind, that I need to save time. So another reason for making a mistake is that if you see, say, a verbose question, something like this, where it's like a lengthy question, a lot of words, a lot of information compressed into the question stem itself, a lot of people panic. And I've seen people panic, especially at the fag end of the exam, when you have, say, 10 minutes left, 6 questions or 5 questions. You see a wordy word problem question and you say, hey, I don't think I can solve it. So let me just mark something and move on. But in my opinion, I've seen a lot of word problem questions, which especially in data sufficiency, though they may seem lengthy, okay, wordy, but if you break it down properly by taking, say, a minute or and a half, after that, analyzing the statement doesn't take a lot of time. And solving these questions ultimately are not that difficult. Okay, so at the end of the day, you need to convince yourself that the question may be wordy, but there are a lot of things, there are a lot of fluff in the question which might not be needed. And don't worry, I'm going to solve a few questions with you, and I'm going to show you these stuff. I'm just putting across my point at this moment, that if you fall under this category, that you always try to save time, you look at a difficult question, or a bit, not a difficult one, a big question, and if you panic, please don't do. I'll show you a lot of questions where it's very, very easy to solve such questions if you analyze properly. Okay. So I've talked about these 4 reasons, and I hope you agree with these reasons. Though nobody pointed out some of the reasons, what do you think about it? Do you agree with these, what I've talked about now? How many of you do? If you do, kindly mark yes. I've been talking for a long time, so I would want your opinion. So do you think, do you fall in this category? If you don't agree with this, then you can say no, but if you agree with this, say yes. If you think that these are the reasons, and you may have at some point or the other fell for these kind of reasons, like maybe conceptual clarity or for a trap. Okay, so I can see most of you, there's few who don't, I don't know why. So you can, if you don't agree with me, you can put your point on chat. But I can see about 94% of you agree with me. So I would say majority of you agree that these are the major problems. So as far as improvement is concerned, it's very simple, guys, as far as the improvement process is concerned. And this might seem very obvious, by the way, where the first one which I'm saying is focus on concepts. Before thinking about PS or DS or the type, I would say the first and the foremost thing is that just start by learning the basic concepts properly, be it any topic, be it word problem, number properties, geometry, algebra. Understand the formulas, understand how you need to, what are the different formulas in all these four uh, regions, topics, basically, number properties, word problem, geometry, and algebra. Okay. Once you've understood this concept, okay, if you want to do well in data sufficiency especially, the second point is really important. Okay, you need to understand how to analyze and understand the right methodology to solve the question. Like, for example, when you see a data sufficiency question, do you just read it and move on, or should you analyze the statement? Okay, before moving on, should you analyze the question stem before moving on to the statements? Okay, and this is something that you can only do by watching us or any experts who are solving questions. Okay, either in the form of text or video solutions, whatever, but you need to emulate that the way we try and solve questions. Okay, see what are we looking at when we are solving a question, what kind of small things we are focusing on, which maybe you might not, because of which you're making a mistake. And I'm going to talk about boosters a bit. Those of you who are not our students may not know what boosters are. Once you've understood the process of solving the question, ideally, you should be able to solve questions well within time limit. But I do agree there will be some. Out of 10, maybe one or two will be still very difficult for you to solve, but don't worry about it. The purpose here is in GMAT, you don't need to get all of them correct. Even if you're looking for a Q50, you have the option of making 3-4 mistakes, even 5, depending on where you're making it. So don't worry about the timing aspect so much. Focus on your concepts. More importantly, after understanding the concept, because most of you do learn the concepts really well, but this is the area where most of you falter in my experience that I've seen. So focus on the right process of solving question and stop worrying about time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is in this webinar, I'm going to take about 6 to 8 questions, depending, as I told you, on the pace of the session. And I'm going to show you through these questions why you falter and how you can avoid faltering in data sufficiency question. What are the small things that you can look at before solving? Okay. And as far as the boosters is concerned, I have just a small slide which is of our portal. Okay, so those of you who are our students, you already know that. But those of you who are not, we basically provide video solutions for our boost questions. So we basically, after you're done with your concepts, we have questions and answers in our quizzes where we're actually showing you in a very detailed manner how to approach a question. Be it a PS question, be it a DS question, everything is properly shown, the total approach. Once you understand how to solve methodically, how to make cases, how to avoid missing information, you will definitely improve. And I'm not saying you have to look at GMAT quiz. You can, from wherever you're practicing, make sure that you focus on the process and not only on the concepts. Okay, with this, guys, I'll start off with the first question. Let me tell you the process, especially for those of you who are attending it for the first time. So how it's going to be conducted is that I'm going to show you a question. Okay. And I'm going to give you about 2.5 minutes to solve the question, okay, depending on how many responses I get within those 2.5 minutes, okay? And then obviously I'll end the poll. I'll give you a poll to mark your answers in, okay? And once you've marked your answer, then I'll discuss why you faltered or what could be, and I'll basically discuss the solution and tell you the right methodology to solve the question. Okay, so this is clear, please mark yes. And a very important thing is that once you've solved the question, mark your answer in the poll. I don't want you to put your answers in the chat box. Please don't put it unless until I say pause or stop. Okay, so I hope this is perfectly clear. Okay, guys, if this is clear, here's your first question on the screen, and let me bring up the poll. So I did the poll also. So all the best, guys. You have 2 minutes to solve it. Another 30 seconds, guys, and I'm going to end the poll. So those of you who haven't responded, please do so. And keep in mind the participation matters. It's okay even if you get it wrong. That's totally okay. But at least you should know why you're making a mistake. So put in your responses. Okay, 10 seconds more. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so you can see the responses. 46% of you think that the answer should be C. 26, that's the next highest of you think that the answer is A. And about 20% of you think that even combining the statements will not be helpful. Okay, before starting off, tell me, how did you find this question? Was this difficult, easy? Let me know your opinion about this question. Was this too difficult? And again, guys, I request you to participate. If the participation is low, it will not serve the purpose of taking the webinar. Okay, Melanie says easy, but took too much time for me to realize. Okay, Kapil says too much data to process. Difficult, too much info, very less time. Aman says difficult. Okay, took me a lot of time to read the question. Okay, a quick question, guys. When you're reading a question, how do you read it? Do you just keep on reading it very quickly in one go, and then you read it again to solve the question? Is that how you do it? Like I've seen students who read it twice. Do you fall under that category? And let me just bring up a yes/no poll very quickly. Do you read the question twice, guys? If you do so, please mark yes. Okay. Okay. Okay, it's almost a close 50-50 split, I would say. Okay, now, yeah, it's a 50-50 split. Okay, so I can see most of you do end up reading it twice. Okay, Quentin says read, make notes. Yes, exactly. So guys, in a word problem question, make sure that you read and make notes at the same time. I'm not saying frame equations then and there, okay, but at least make notes so that you don't have to refer to the question again. Because if you're in a situation where you have to keep on referring it, then you will take a lot of time. Okay, and I gave you about 2.5 minutes to solve the question. I deliberately give you slightly less time, but this question, if you read it properly, if you do the pre-analysis properly by taking say about 1.5 minute, then using these statements and so solving the question by analyzing the statements will not take much time, and that's what I'm going to show you. So first thing is I'll solve the question the way I solve it. Okay, I'll read it and show you what I would have done if I'm solving this question. Okay, so and after that, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So here's how I would do it. I would read it like this. Okay, in a certain team, so there's a team, the workforce planning sheet for each day, so there's a sheet for each day, is given a 8-digit unique document number. Okay, so I have a 8-digit unique documentation number. So what I might do very quickly is maybe make 8 spaces, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 spaces. Okay, now they're telling me the first 6 digits of the document is the date of preparation of the planning sheet in the DDMMYY format. So I'll do the same thing very quickly. I'll mark DDMMYY. So I don't have to go back to the statement at least till this point. All the information that is there. So 3 lines. Notice after reading 2.5 lines roughly, this is all the information that you have. In fact, if I include the example, this is all the information that you have. So they're giving me an example that 3rd February 2010 will have its first 6 digit as 03, which makes sense, and 02 and 10. So the last 2 digits. So 3.5 lines, just this information. Okay. Now let's look at the next part. The seventh digit of the document, so they're talking about this digit, so let me mark the seventh like this, of the document is the units digit. Okay, units digit. So now the things are getting complicated, so I'll write 7 separately. This is basically the units digit of 9 times, and see I'm writing it directly, 9 times the sum of the first and the third digit. So now they're talking in terms of first, second, so it makes sense for me to mark this. I don't want to take a risk at all. So I'll say first and third. Okay. So first and third, multiply it, you'll get the units digit. Great. Okay. And the eighth digit of the document, which is the eighth digit of the document, so I'll write eighth. This is the units digit of 11 times the sum of the second and the fourth digit. Okay, so I'll very quickly write down second plus fourth. So notice all the information so far has been captured on the piece of paper. So I don't need to go back whatever happens. Okay. Now, last two lines says, if a document number is of the form A, B, so now they're making my life a bit easy by telling me A, B, C, D, 1, 3, 8, 1, where A, B, C, D are non-negative single digit numbers, which is fine, in which month and on what date of that month the document was prepared. So basically, they're asking me to find out A, B, C, D. That's all. Okay. So far, so good. I hope there's no questions, anyone. Now, what I would do is, one way obviously is to jump into these statements, okay? But in the exam, I don't know what kind of statement I'll be dealing with, okay? So in the exam, what I might have done is, I might have looked at these A, B, C, D and made some inference about these variables. For example, what can I say about A? Can anyone tell me, what are the values that A can take? Anyone? What are the possible values that A can take? Keep in mind that, okay, okay, Deepak says 1 to 31. Okay, but I was talking about just the, Deepak, I was talking about just A. You're correct, 1 to 31. But notice you can, the maximum that you have is 31st, right? When you are dealing with a date. So this digit or the lowest that you can have is 0, 1. So it could be 0, 1, 2, 3. So these small inferences can help you. They are intuitive. This is something that you already know, but jotting it down can help you out. Same goes for month. Now, if I look at C, the reason I'm looking at C is because here I'm dealing with A plus C, first and third. If you notice, I'm dealing with A plus C. So let me talk about C. Now, C again is a month. The maximum that you can go is 12, right? December. And the minimum that you can go is 0, 1. So that means C can take 0 and 1. Okay. I hope this part is perfectly clear. Now, guys, understand this. This is the seventh digit. The data is given to me that this is 8. They have told me that this value, the units digit, is 8. Now tell me, 9 times what should I multiply with? Okay, so that I get the units digit as 8. Can anyone tell me? 9 times what gives me 8? What is the unit digit? So that I end up getting an 8. Okay, Antul says 2. Yes, right. 9 times 2 is 18. So I know that A plus C should some way give me 2. A plus C should be 2 so that I can get 9 times 2 as 8. So notice things are all now falling into place. So I know I'm looking for A plus C is equal to 2, which is only possible if I have 2 plus 0 or 1 plus 1. So now I have narrowed down my A and values of C. So it could be 2, 0 or 1, 1, nothing else. Okay. Now, as far as B and D are concerned, now B and D are kind of tricky. You could have said, okay, B plus D. Notice the unit digit is 1. You're adding B and D and you're getting 1. Now tell me, if you're getting 1 here, 11 times what would give you 1? 11 times something is giving unit digit as 1. What could that be? Anyone? This is easy, right? Deepak, it cannot be 0, 2 because C cannot take 2. Just to clarify, Deepak, I hope that's clear. It cannot. Very good, guys. So obviously, so I was talking about just the unit digit. You're right, it could be 1 or 11. So anything is possible. But the point is that the unit digit of this has to be 1. Okay. So this is what I know. And I'm not working with B and D here because B and D can take many values because there's no restriction on B and D. So I'll say, okay, I know the sum of B and D should be 1. I know that A and C would be 2011. I have this information. Now let me go to the statements and see what I can do with it. Okay, I can, if I want, I can make cases here also, but it doesn't make sense because because you know that there'll be a lot of cases. So I will not make those cases. I'll save time here. Instead of making a lot of cases, I'll go to the statement and see if I can simplify my life. Okay, now notice they're telling you the first statement is the first 2 digits of the documents are 20. Okay, now they're making my life easy. See, they're telling you this is 2. If A is 2, then obviously C has to be 0, because the only possible case is 20. So notice I'm not spending much time in my statements. I know this is 20. If B is 0, and I know the sum of B plus D has to be 1 or 11, whatever. If this is 0, then D has to be 1. There's no other possibility. So see, how much time am I spending on my statements? Roughly 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Because major time is spent here. So I'm spending 1.5 minutes. In the actual exam, I would be spending here, making sure that I have everything properly. And in the statements, I'm spending less time because now I know what I'm looking for. So as you can see, I'm getting a unique answer, 20011381. That is why statement 1 is sufficient. If statement 1 is sufficient, then obviously the answer can be either A or D. So you can eliminate the rest of the option B, C, E. Okay, I hope this is perfectly clear till this point. Okay, let's go to the second statement. I'm going to the next slide, but I'll copy out some of the stuff so that we know what we have with us. One, 3, 8, 1. Okay, and we know that B plus D, the unit digit should be 1. Okay, second statement is the sum of the first and the third digit is a multiple of 2, which we already know. See, I won't be wasting my time here. I already know it's a multiple of 2. So it could be 20, it could be 11. Both cases are possible. And the second digit is 0. Now, even if I know the second digit, okay, if the second digit is 0 and I say this is 1, say for example, I still have 2 cases with me. I don't know which case is possible because multiple of 2 is 2 plus 0 also, and multiple of 2 is 1 plus 1 also. You are getting 2 different cases here. Since you're getting 2 different cases, and notice this is a what is the value kind of question. This is not a yes no kind of a question. This is where you need to find a unique answer. That means one single answer. Since you're not getting one single answer, you'll say that this statement is not sufficient. And since this is not sufficient, your answer will be option A. So any doubts, anyone? If you have any doubts, please ask in the chat box. If this is perfectly clear, please mark yes. So the major reason behind giving this question, guys, was to just tell you that a wordy question may seem difficult, but I hope you realize that if you break it down properly, try and read it only once, make sure that you jot down all the information properly, you will be able to solve the question correctly and within the time limit. Okay. Another important point which I would like to add here is that, see, there will be some easy questions where you will be spending less time, like say 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 1 minute, 30 seconds. So if you get a difficult wordy question also, it is okay to spend 2.5 to 3 minutes, as long as you're following the right process to get the answer. Okay, so don't worry about time too much. Okay, I can see it's clear to everyone. Everyone's marking yes. They've understood the learning, which is good. Okay, so let's come to the next one, guys. Again, take your time, read it properly, jot down the information properly, and then solve the question. And I've added the poll. All the best, guys. Okay, guys, I'll give you another 30 seconds. People have started putting in the responses. So those of you haven't, who are solving, you have about 30 seconds to put in a response very quickly. By the way, I forgot to mention in the previous question, most of you fell for the trap. If you'll notice, only about 26% of you had got that the previous question correct. 20%, no, yeah, 26%. But most of you fell for the C and E trap. And here I'm deliberately giving you more time. You've already exceeded 2.5 minutes, by the way, but I want you to get it correct, so you have all the time. Okay, 10 seconds, then I'm going to end the poll. Okay, so here I have 42% of you think that the answer should be D, 35% think that the answer should be A, and I have a few C's and E's. About 20% of you think, 21% of you think that the answer should be C or E. Okay, fair enough. Tell me, what do you think about this question? Obviously, this is less wordy than the previous one, but in terms of difficulty level, did you find this difficult, or was this much more easier to comprehend, easy to solve? Any thoughts? Okay, Aman says moderate. Yes, Aman, even I would, if you ask me, I would classify this as a somewhere between 650 to 700, not more than that. At least not 700 plus. Okay, Vidya says easier to comprehend. Yes, I thought at least this would be easier to comprehend. But Kapil mentioned something which is correct. He's saying that easy to comprehend, but fractions got to me. Well, I deliberately gave a few fractions. The original question had a few ratios and percentages, but I thought to mix it up a bit. Okay. Okay, let's discuss this question very quickly. So in this, again, I'll solve it like this, the way I usually do in the exam. I would read it. I'd say, okay, on a certain day, a furniture store sold only chairs, tables, and wardrobes. So I would write it like this, chair. Okay, let me write it like this, chair, tables. And in fact, let me use shorthand, and this would waste a lot of time. So I'll write it as CTW because they're all distinct, so easy for me to work with. Okay. Of all the furniture that was sold on that day, okay, so they're talking about that day, 1/8 were tables. Okay, this was 1/8. 1/4 were chair, and 5/8 were wardrobes. Now understand this, that whenever you're given information, let me talk about it separately here somewhere, so that I can help you understand. When you're given something like this, fractions, you can convert them either into ratios, or you can take a value, so that you don't have to deal. When I say values, what I mean is values in terms of variables, so that you don't have to deal with fractions. Okay, so whenever I have something like this, table, chair, wardrobe, in terms of fraction, I prefer converting them into ratios. So what I do is I simply multiply. You can notice 8, 4, 8. So you can multiply all of them by 8 to get rid of the fraction, and say chair is to table is to chair is to wardrobe is basically 1 is to 2 is to 5. Easier to work with. And when you have the ratio, so if, for example, you have x, 2x, x, 1, 2, and 5, you can now say, if I talk in terms of units, you can say the number of chairs is basically 2x because it's 2 here. The number of tables is x, and the number of wardrobe is 5x. So I hope this part is clear. If you don't want to deal with fractions, you want to work with ratios, if you're comfortable with it, frankly, I am more comfortable with it. I very quickly convert them into ratios, and then I write them as x, 2x, and 5x. Okay. And making sure that I write it in a proper way so that I don't make a mistake. Table, chair, wardrobe, everything so far looks perfect. Okay. So I've worked with this. This part is done. Now, they're telling me in the question that the revenue from which of these three, that is chairs, tables, and wardrobes, was the greatest. Now, This is a typical kind of question where you are dealing with units and revenue. Whenever you're dealing with unit and revenue, it makes sense for you to kind of take the per unit cost also into account. Okay. What I mean by that is, if you have units, there'll always be a per unit cost, which you are not aware of, by the way. Okay, let me write it like this: per unit cost. Okay, in dollars or whatever. And this is the total revenue. So if I know the cost of one chair, I can multiply it and get the total revenue. If I know the cost of one table, I can multiply, get the total revenue. If I know of this, I can find out the total revenue. And I need to figure out which of this is the greatest. Okay. Now, obviously, there's nothing else that you can do with the statement. All the information has been plotted on the table. Now, I took some time to explain it to you, but ideally in the exam, the moment you see 1 by 8, 1 by 4, 5 by 8, you should be able to do this, and you should be able to write this within 45 seconds. I would say 45 to 50 seconds, not more than that. Maybe at the max a minute, but this should be done after a minute. Okay. Now, let's move to the first statement, statement number 1. The selling price of one chair, one table, notice one chair, one table, one wardrobe is 6, 5, and 3. Okay. So there's one common mistake a lot of people make is when they say 6, 5, and 3, they end up writing it like this: 6x, 5x, 3x. The only mistake that you're making here is that if you've already used x as a variable for one ratio, like the first ratio you took it as x, make sure that you use a different variable for this. So you can say it as 6y, 5y, 3y. Okay, and now you can say that the total revenue in this case is 12xy, the total revenue is 5xy, and the total revenue in this case is 15xy. Okay, any questions, anyone so far? And if there are no questions, can you tell me which one has the greatest revenue? Anyone? 12xy, 5xy, 15xy. Which one is the greatest? Or can we find it out? Okay. So Antul says W. Anyone else? Wardrobe. Okay. So all of you agree, right? I hope I was hoping nobody would say that hey, we cannot find it. We can always find the answer. Okay, because see, xy is common in all of them. Xy is multiplied in all these things. So I don't need to worry about xy. I need to see what is this coefficient here, which is the greatest. In this case, it's 15xy. So I'll say statement 1 is sufficient. If statement 1 is sufficient, then your answer can be A or D. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So whenever you're dealing with a ratio, one major learning is always write it as in terms of variable, easy to deal with. And second, if you're working with fractions, convert them into ratios to work with. Second learning. Okay, now let's go to the second statement. And unfortunately, I'll have to once again quickly draw this. So give me just 15 seconds. So units is, what is it? 2x, 5x. This is the revenue. Okay, good. Now, in this statement, let's look at the second statement. The price of one table is $10 less than the price of one chair. Okay, so I don't know the price of a chair. So if I take this as C, then the price of the table is $10 less. So I can write it as $10. And keep this in mind, this is for one chair, for per unit again. This is the per unit cost. Okay, so the price of one table is $10 less. And the price of one wardrobe, the price of one wardrobe is $20 less than the price of one table. So this is the price of one table, C minus 10. Wardrobe is 20 less than this. So C minus 10 minus 20. Again, I'm writing all the steps so that nobody has any confusion. But this is the price of the wardrobe. Now, if I look at the total revenue, I'll get 2x times C. I'll get here x C minus 10. And here I'll get 5x C minus 30. Now tell me, from this, can I figure out which one is greater? If yes, how? If no, why? Anyone? And again, there's no right or wrong answers. If it's okay if you make a mistake. If you're saying no, tell me how did you, why are you saying that you cannot? If you're saying yes, then obviously you, okay, substitute a value of X. Melanie says, okay. And C, don't know the actual value of C. Okay. All these methodologies, by plugging in small and large values, different answers. So Deepak says small and large, which is kind of correct, but I'll show you a more methodical way, guys, okay? Where you can, with the help of inference and a bit of, I wouldn't say calculation, but I would say you have to set up translation is the word I would use. You can figure out definitely whether you can get an answer or not. And let me show you how. Notice in case of table, the number of units sold is less than chair. Okay, and even the price is less. So I can be 100% sure that the price of the chair, the total revenue from the chair, the revenue here, this one has to be greater than this. It will be greater. This one has to be greater. I hope this one is clear. So revenue from chair has to be greater than revenue from table, because chair I'm selling more units and the price is also more than the table. So that is definitely there. So no questions about it. Okay. Now let's compare chair and wardrobe, because I need to figure out, this is the least. So can wardrobe come here or not? Okay. This is what I need to figure out. Can wardrobe be the greatest or not? So I'm removing this, guys. I hope that's not a problem. Let me remove this. And let's focus on these two. Just chair and wardrobe. Now notice number of units that wardrobe is selling is more. Wardrobe is selling more units. But the cost is less. Okay. So this is more, but this is less. So you can never be sure what's really happening. So how much less is it? You can never be sure whether this is greater or this is greater. Okay, you don't know, because number of units is more, but the cost is less. Maybe the low cost might make the revenue lower than the chair. And you might wonder, hey, how do I figure out? This is where translation comes into picture. Okay, just take one assumption. Just say, hey, can 2xc, which is the revenue, be greater than 5x c minus 30? Just ask yourself, when does this happen? Notice x is a positive number, so you can cancel out x. You'll be left with 2c. You'll get 5c minus 150. Take 150 to the other side. Bring 2c this side. You'll get 150, and here you'll get 3c. So c is less than 50. Oops. Just one sec, guys. One sec. I think I accidentally stopped share. Give me one sec. Let me bring it back. Okay, I hope you can see the presentation now. If you can see, can you please mark yes in this in your chat box very quickly? Okay. So notice what's happening here is that you're getting, when you divide both sides by 3, you get C is less than 50. Now this is actually telling you that when C is less than 50, revenue from chair will be more than revenue from wardrobe when C is less than 50. But what if C is more than 50? In that case, it will reverse. And do you know whether you're selling less than 50 chairs or more than 50 chairs? You don't know that. You don't have any clue about the actual number of chairs that you're selling. Since you have no clue about the actual number of chairs that you're selling, you can say that this statement is not sufficient. I'll reiterate the process once again, because this is something that you may use in other questions also. It could be an algebra question or another word problem question where you're comparing two revenues or units. So whenever you come across a situation where, if you notice, this is less, 5x is more, but the per unit cost is less. So the product can go in either direction. You don't know what's happening, okay? So if you really want to figure out which one is greater, you can set up an inequality and check when it is greater, when it is less. And if you have any information about it, like for example, C less than 50, and if in the question, say for example, if it was given that number of chairs sold was 38, say for example, just giving a random number, then this could have been sufficient. This might have turned out to be sufficient, but you don't know this value, you don't know the per unit cost, you don't know whether C is less than 50 or more than 50. Since you don't know that, you will not be able to get the answer. So this is not sufficient. The only statement which was sufficient was A, statement 1. So your answer is A. Which, if you notice your poll, only 35% of you get it correct. And most of you fell for the trap, which is the D trap, which was set here. A lot of people just check one or two values and they end up marking the answer. So for example, some of you may have checked for say 35 or 40, and maybe have said, hey, C is coming greater, so I think it's sufficient. This is the trap of placing numbers, just putting in numbers randomly without checking. Okay, it always makes sense to check extreme cases, or at least figure out in what range you need to check. The moment you start doing it, you'll start getting questions correct. Now let me know if this is perfectly clear. Please mark yes if this is clear. If you have any doubts, please feel free to ask in the chat box. But I hope you're taking the learnings from these. Okay, these questions are not standalone questions. Each question have been chosen for a reason. Okay, I can see it's clear to everyone. Everyone's saying yes, which is good. So let's move on to the third one. Here's the third question, guys. And let me bring up the poll. And here's the poll. Okay, guys, you have 45 seconds more. Then I'll end the poll. Twenty seconds. I would encourage all of you to please put in a response. It's okay if you get it wrong, not a problem. Okay, with 10 seconds more, then I'll end it. Okay, ending it now. Okay, 63% of you think that the answer should be B. About 26% of you think the answer is C, and I have a few D's and E's also 5%. So what about this question? Easier than the last one? Or was it difficult? What do you think, guys? Did you find it easy? Did you find it difficult? Okay, Ayushi says easy. Okay, Melanie says difficult and tricky. Okay. Priya says easier than the last one. Okay. Okay, guys, what if I say that the accuracy of this question is not better than the last one. The accuracy here also, I would say about most of you, majority of you fell for the trap in this question also, majority of you. Okay, and I'll talk about the kind of trap which you fell into while discussing it very quickly now. Frankly speaking, this is easy. If you ask my opinion, I would place this between 600 to 650 level. Okay, but there's a very small trap. I won't say a trap also, but a common mistake which students make, which I thought makes sense for me to talk about. Okay. But first, let's look at the table. The question is fairly simple. You'll get a lot of, you'll see that in official questions in GMAT prep also, questions like this: multiplication table, addition table, where each entry is an integer, okay? And we need to find out the value of q. Now, this is the table that you have. What you can do is you can write down the values if you want to in the table very quickly. So you can set it up on your own on your piece of paper and say, okay, this is p square. So this is how you do it. You take these two, you multiply it, and you say, okay, p times p is p square. So this is p square. Then you take 2, you take p, and you say this is 2p. Okay. This again would be p times q. This is 2p. This is obviously 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Nothing that I can do here. This is 2q. This is pq. This is 2q. And this is q square. So it makes sense to put all of it in the box in the table so that I know what I'm dealing with. I'm looking for q here. So a lot of ways to get q. If I don't look at the statement, if I ignore it for a moment, then obviously I can say, okay, to find out q, there are x is equal to pq, y is equal to tq. There are a lot of places where I can find out the value of q depending on what am I given about x, w, y, whatever. Okay. Now, let's look at the first statement. The first statement is w is greater than 1. Okay. Now, what is w in this case? If you'll notice, w is 2p. And they're saying w is greater than 1. So if I look at statement 1, can you tell me what can I infer from this? What is my inference in this case? Why do you think we were given this information? Why do you think this information was given? Yeah, w is a multiple of 2. That's absolutely correct. But what's the purpose of giving w is greater than 1? Don't we already know w is greater than 1? If w is 2p, won't it be greater than 1? Very good. So Deepak, Prayas, everybody, Mark, now you're saying the correct answer. That is, p is not equal to 0. So basically, you can say if it is greater than 1, then p is positive. Okay, that is the inference that you need to draw out here. If you're not drawing out here, or if you're not saying p is not equal to 0, you're making a mistake. Okay, obviously it's not going to help us in any way because we are looking for q. Knowing p, at least from statement 1, it's not useful. But you should ideally draw that inference saying if they're telling me this, then p is not equal to 0. But statement 1 is not sufficient because I don't know anything about q. So I'll cancel out a and d. I'll move to statement 2. Now statement 2 is w is equal to y times p. Okay, and we also know that w is equal to 2p. So I can say 2p is equal to y times p. Okay, now if 2p is equal to y times p, what can I infer from this? If 2p is equal to y times p, what is my inference? Can anyone tell me what's the inference that you can draw out from here? If 2p is equal to y times p? P is equal to y. Deepak says p is equal to 0, y equal to 2. Okay, anyone else? Y is equal to 2, y is equal to 2, y equal to 2. Okay, guys, those of you are saying, so I think only Deepak got it correct in this case. This is the mistake that which I wanted to talk about. We usually end up canceling p both sides, right? It's a very common mistake that a lot of people make, canceling both sides. Now, keep in mind, when I say canceling, I mean dividing by p and canceling it out, or the same thing as canceling. You cannot eliminate P like this. Do you know P is, do you have any information about P which says that P is not equal to 0? Do you know that? A mistake that most people make is that when they read that the entry is an integer, the mistake I'm talking about, when you read the word integer, your brain is kind of hardwired to think about only positive integers. And you need to change that. It's very important. This is a wrong inference. When you see the word integer, okay, the inference that you should make is that if all the entries are integer, that means it could be a positive integer, it could be a negative integer, or it could be 0 also. All three are possible. Very important learning. Lot of DS questions, PS questions where people make a mistake is because they intuitively look at integers and think that it's a positive integer, which is wrong. If you don't know whether it's positive or if you don't know whether it is not equal to 0, you cannot cancel out P like this, or you cannot divide by P like this. In situations like this where you don't know, you bring everything to one side, you take common, and then you say if P times y minus 2 equal to 0, then that means either P is equal to 0 or y is equal to 2 or both. But I hope this part is clear. A very important learning which I hope you'll keep in mind. P square is equal to V, then V can also be 0, Deepak. 0 square is 0. So I hope that answers your query. But everyone else, is this part clear? Let me bring up the poll very quickly. Okay, here's the poll. If this is clear, please mark yes. Make a note of it, sticky note, whatever you want to make, but keep this in mind that you cannot cancel out variables unless until you know it's non-zero. And if you're given integer, keep positive, 0, negative all in mind. Okay, so you have P is equal to 0, Y is equal to 2. So you don't know what's really happening. So you cannot be sure that Y is definitely 2. I hope you understand that. If you would have known Y is definitely 2, then I agree you could have found out the value of Q by using this. I'm sure most of you use this to find out the answer. You could have, but you don't know that. Okay, since you don't know Y is definitely 2, even this statement is not sufficient. So statement 2 will also be discarded. Okay, now when you combine, now you'll appreciate the importance of this statement. If W is greater than 1, the inference that we made was P is positive, P is not equal to 0. If P is not equal to 0, then after combining, I can cancel out this case. I'll say, hey, if P is not 0, then obviously Y has to be 2. If Y is not 2, then the product will not be 0. So after combining, you can definitely be sure that Y is 2. Once you get 2, you can place it here and find out the value of Q. So the correct answer in this case would be option C, which only 26% of you marked as the correct answer. Okay, so see, a very easy question. No calculation at all, if you notice, hardly any calculation. Statement 1 was based on inference. Statement 2 was just a two-line calculation. But there also you had to make a very important inference, a very important simplification. Keep in mind, again, I'll reiterate, don't cancel unless you know it's non-zero. If it's an integer, keep all of these in mind. Okay, if this is perfectly clear, all the explanation is perfectly clear, please mark yes, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, I can see it's perfectly clear, which is good. Okay, guys, so let's go to the fourth question. And here's the poll. Once again, you have 2.5 minutes to solve this. Another 10 seconds, guys, then I'll end the poll. I can see the accuracy is improving a bit in this case, which is very good. I'm really happy to see that. Okay, let me end the poll now. Okay, so 66% of you think that the answer should be B in this case. And I have about 16% of you think the answer is A. And I have a few D's and E's. Okay, so the next choice is 16%. Okay, fine. Tell me, guys, how did you approach this question and what did you think of this question? Was it difficult, easy? Okay, Aman says moderate. Quick question, how many of you knew the formula of curved surface area? Please mark yes if you knew the formula. Okay, Mark says not easy. Okay. Okay, if you knew the formula, mark yes. Okay, okay, all of you knew it, which is, okay, some of you don't know it. Okay. Okay, that's fine, guys. That's okay. But most of you, I can see, know the formula, which is good. Okay. So in this question, notice that you are given that a right cylindrical tank, you have T1, has a base radius of R and height of H. So radius is R, height is H. These are the usual things that are always given. And we are told that if the base radius and height of a cylindrical tank T2 is A% and B% greater than that of tank 1. Okay, so there is a tank 2 and the radius of this is A% greater. So how should I write this A% greater? Can anyone tell me? How should I write this? A% greater. What should I do? So because if you, I also want to test your, if you know how to write percentage increase, decrease or not. So if you have the radius is R, and if you're increasing by A%, what will you write it as? 1.0 AR. Okay, so you converted that 1.0, Deepak says 1.A by 100. Sanket also says 1 plus A by 10. So I think you're talking about 100, Sanket also. So see, most of you are correct. You just increase it by A%, right? And ideally, if your concept is good, you should ideally be able to write it like this directly. If so, in general, if there's an entity X, and if you are increasing it by say P%, then the final value is 1 plus P by 100. If you're decreasing it, it is 1 minus P by 100. So keep this in mind. So you can do that directly. Here, the height obviously is B% more, so you should be able to write it directly 1 plus P by 100. Okay. Now, let's look at what else is what are being told. Now we're talking about the curved surface area, then the curved surface area of tank T2. So it makes sense to first of all write it out, 2 pi RH. What is the radius? The radius is this. Height is this. This is the curved surface area. So the formula, if those of you don't know, is 2 pi RH. That's the formula. Okay. So the curved surface area of this would be simply 2 pi RH. The curved surface area of this is, and I'm simplifying this a bit so that it is easier to understand. These are all multiplication sign, but writing it like this makes it easy to visualize. Okay. So the curved surface area of T2 is what percent more. Notice these words are important: percent more, percent less. So percent more, when they are saying, first of all, find out the difference between the curved surface area. Okay, and to find out the percentage, they're talking about the percent curved surface area of T2 with respect to T1, percent more than. Now than, whatever is written tells you what should go in the denominator. Okay, so percent more, how will you find more or less? You find out the difference between them. Okay, and since it's a percentage, you have to keep something in the denominator. The denominator is decided by this part, than the curved surface area of T1. So I'm finding it with respect to T1. So T1 comes in the denominator. So basically we are looking out for this. Okay. Now you can make your life easy. Whenever I'm dealing with expressions, what I do is this can be written like this. Notice you'll get the same stuff. T2 minus T1 by T1, but I'm writing it like this. The advantage of this is, see, T2 is this value, 2 pi RH. If I write it down, it's a bit clumsy, but let me try to fit in here. This is T2. What is your T1? Minus 1 multiplied by 100. Now notice an interesting thing. This 2 pi RH is getting cancelled out. So to find out the percentage, notice the only thing that you're left with, which if to get the answer, is the value of A and B. The moment you know the value of A and B, you'll be able to find out the curved surface area. And that is an inference. Notice that we derived by doing just the analysis of the question stem. We haven't even gone to the statements. But if our concept is clear, we should be able to write this directly, 2 pi RH. If our concept is clear, again, conceptual analysis plays a big role here. You should be able to write these two very quickly. The little bit time that you might have taken would be here. And here, notice simplification plays a big role. You should know which formula to use when and how. So I know writing it like this will help me cancel out 2 pi RH. So let me cancel it out. So you know you need the value of A and B that is required. With this knowledge, go to the statements. Now statement 1 is the ratio of R and H, which you know is not needed. See, I'm not even spending time here, about 10 seconds just to read 5 seconds. That's all. I'll say this is not sufficient. This is not sufficient. My answer cannot be A or D. The second statement is telling you the value, the base radius and height of C2, that is, in fact, this should be T2, is 25% and 30% more than T1. So they're giving the value of A and B. They're giving you this value. And this is what you need. You need the value of A and B only. You're getting it from statement 2. So you'll say statement 2 is sufficient, and the correct answer is option B. Which is good. In this case, about more than 60% of you got it correct. So that's a good thing. But those of you who got it incorrect, about 30% of you could not get the answer. I hope it's perfectly clear how you need to solve it. And those of you, even if you got it correct, I hope there was some learning for you here, how to simplify the question and how to solve it. Okay. If this is perfectly clear, please mark yes. And then I'll move on to the next question. In fact, I want to give you an algebra question now. So if this is clear, okay, great. So let's move on to an algebra question. Yeah, try out this one, guys. I've opened up the poll for you. Another 30 seconds, guys, then I'll end the poll. I've got a few responses, but I want a bit more. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, I think most of you found the question difficult. That's my assumption, looking at the data point. But what about you all, guys? What do you think? Was this difficult? Or was this easy? Okay, Deepak says easy. What about the others? Did you find it easy, difficult? Difficult, couldn't finalize between C and E. Akshat says easy. Okay. What about the others? The answer says otherwise, by the way. Based on your responses, I don't think that you found it easy, or maybe you marked the wrong answer. Okay, Quentin also says fell. Okay. Okay, let me do one thing. Let me solve the question. Okay. And then let's see, then I'll ask how many of you felt it was easy. Okay. But before doing that, I'll ask a question. How many of you, in fact, Deepak mentioned it, how many of you know VB line method or number line method, whatever you want to call it? How many of you know how to work with number line method? How many of you know how to solve questions using number line method? Please mark yes if you do. Number line or wavy line, whatever you want to call it, there are different names. The approach kind of remains still the same. Okay. So I can see a lot of you don't know it. It's, I think a 50-50 split almost. So, so what I'll suggest, guys, is that obviously I'll try and discuss a bit about this one, but I would also suggest you to kind of look at a video where I have explained this. Okay. So I've put it here. I'm broadcasting it also. So if you want, you can later on after the session is done. If you want to look at it once, wavy line method, you definitely should. But I'll try to explain it as briefly as possible. Okay, so that we can do this quickly. Now, these kind of typical DS questions are questions where there's no pre-analysis possible. They're simply a short question stem: is x greater than 0? So this is a yes/no kind of question. So either I have to say yes, it is greater than 0, or no, it's greater than not greater than 0. Okay, but there's no pre-analysis that I can do. So what I'll do is I'll simply move on to this statement. So statement 1. Now, when you're working with statements, I see people plugging in values to solve the question. I would not recommend it. What ideally you should do is simplify and create factors like this. Okay. Also, let me make one thing clear here, because sometimes people don't understand when I'm talking about number line method. When I say, let me take a very simple example. X square is less than 4, a very example. And the range is basically this. Okay. When I say x square is less than 4, this basically means I'm trying to find out the values of x. Okay, values of x, which when I plug in on the left-hand side, will give me values less than 4. Okay, and this basically gives me those values of x. Okay, what I mean by that is when I say x times x minus 4 times x plus 4 is greater than 0, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find out the range of x, or say values of x, for which this product, the product of x, x minus 4, x plus 4 is greater than 0. Okay, values of x for which. So when I plug, say, for example, 5 here, 5 is a value of x which gives me greater than 0. Okay, the product is positive. So this is one small thing that you need to keep in mind. Obviously, there are other nuances of this methodology, which I'm not getting into it. But long story short, this is what you're doing. Now, If instead of a greater than 0, if you had something like this, if you had an equal to 0, what would you have done? You would have found the points, right? You would have said x equal to 0, x equal to 4, x equal to -4. You would have found 3 points. Do that. Okay. In a number line method, what you do is you first of all find out the points, which we call 0 points or reference points. You find that and you plot it on the number line. -4, 0, and 4. Now these are all regions of x, okay, all values of x which I can plug in this statement. Now in a number line method, to simplify it, and again there could be a lot of questions, but I'm just telling it now only. This is the process. If you want to know more about it, look at the YouTube video, or you can also look at inequalities that is taught in our course also. But what you do is you start marking plus minus alternatively on the number line after drawing the 0 points. So there are 4 regions. Start from the extreme right. Okay, start with positive, positive, negative, positive, negative. Okay, and in a number line method, what you do is you look at what are you trying to find out. If you're trying to find out greater than 0, okay, then you're looking for only positive regions. What I mean by that is, in the number line, see where have you marked positive, that would be your range. So in this case, this is positive, okay, and this is a number line. So if I'm saying anything greater than 4 is positive, so the range would become x is greater than 4. And the range could also be this. X could lie here also between -4 to 0 also. Okay, so this is the range of x. So I hope this is partially clear also, if not fully. Whatever I've discussed, is this part at least clear? I know the number line is something which I cannot discuss fully in this session, but whatever I've told you till now, is that part clear? You find out the 0 points. Okay, you mark those points on the number line. And start from the extreme right, you mark positive, negative, positive, negative. If you're looking for greater than 0, you just see where have you marked positive. That is your answer. Okay. Now let's look at the second statement. Because obviously now you can understand this is not sufficient. If x is greater than 0, that if x is greater than 4, then that means x is greater than 0. X is positive. But here in this case, notice x is greater than -4. So there could be a value of x. There could be a value of x, if, for example, x equal to -3, right? So notice you're getting two contradictory answers. You're getting either x is positive, or you're getting values of x which could be negative also. So since there are two different cases that you're getting, you'll say that this is not sufficient. Okay, so I hope this part is clear, that the range includes both positive and negative values. That's why this is not sufficient. Second statement also, solve it like this. Notice that you can take in the second statement x cube common. So take that common out and write it like this: x square minus 9. Or in fact, let me do it very directly only: x square minus 3 square. And you can write it like this: x plus 3 times x minus 3 less than 0. Once again, find out the 0 points. Here also, there's nothing different. Let me use this space a bit to find it out, because I need to draw the number line below. So you have x cube, x plus 3, x minus 3 equal to 0. So what would be the values? You would have said x equal to 3, x equal to -3, and x equal to +3. These are the 3 values that you would get. So draw that on the number line. You're getting 3, you're getting 0, and you're getting -3. Mark it. And same story, extreme right, start with positive, negative, positive, negative. What are you looking for? You're looking for less than 0. That means if you see less than 0, that means you need to look at the negative region. Okay, so in this case, you would say x lies between 0 and 3, and x can be less than -3. So notice once again, you're getting contradictory answers. If it is between 0 and 3, then it will be positive. But if it is less than 3, then it will be negative, right? So I cannot be sure whether x is greater than 0 or not in this statement also, because x could be positive, negative, both. So your answer is not A, your answer is not B, your answer is not D. So it has to be between C and E. Okay. Now, what you do is you combine both of them. When you're combining, it's best to have the number line like in this form. Now, notice here, let me use a different color if possible, so that it will be easy to understand. Notice this is the range here. This is the range here. Okay. And we also had this range before. This is the range of second inequality. Just try and find what is common between them. Notice nothing is common. Here, nothing is common. Here, nothing is common. But the only common part that you'll notice is here. This is the only common part between both the inequalities. The rest of them, it's valid here, but it's not valid here. So look for the common point. This is the common point, which, as you can notice, is completely negative. So you can say definitely that x is less than 0. Since x is less than 0, and you can answer this question by combining both these statements, the correct answer would be option C, not E, which majority of you marked. That's why I said, and in fact, I had a lot of A, B, and Ds also. So tell me if this is clear or not. If this is clear, please mark yes. This is slightly difficult, I know. I would strongly suggest going through the video lessons. If you are a student, you can go through our quadratic inequality video lesson. You'll be able to understand all about number line method. Okay. Somebody's saying, can we get the recording? So I'm adding the recording here again. Somebody's asking recording of this session. So guys, we add the recordings on our YouTube channel. So I'm adding the link out here. So Krishna, you can access it from this this link. So if you want to see the recording later on, you can see it from here. Okay. See, these are easy, I will say. I'll go back again to the same point which I said before, that to solve a question, you should, number one, have conceptual clarity. This is like a conceptual clarity kind of a question. If you don't know number line properly, you will face a lot of problem solving this question. If you know number line, making the number line will doesn't take much of a time. If you try and take values and then solve the question, then believe me, you'll spend 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and there's still a big chance, huge chance that you'll mark the answer as E. Okay. Now somebody's asking me to explain, I can see two queries asking me to explain every, so Kapil, I cannot explain the whole stuff because in the interest of time, because I need to do one more question. So if I would request you to go through the recording once again, okay? And if you still have doubts, you can write to us. That's not a problem. I'll try and help you out, okay? As far as the common part is concerned, Tanya, what I'm saying is that just focus what is common in both, so the first inequality gives you the range for only the first inequality. The second inequality gives you the range of only second inequality. Now you need to see which one is common for both of them. Notice the red line and the green line. Okay. Common part is a part which overlaps for both the number lines. The only part which is overlapping is this part here for both of them. Apart from that, there's no overlap, because I'm not considering for the second range, I'm not considering this part. So I cannot count this, I cannot count this, I cannot count this. Okay, so in both the number lines, just look where they are overlapping a common range for both of them. Okay. Priyas is asking, understood the number line method, what is the general approach? So Priyas, this is the method to solve the question. This is the general approach. The wrong approach is taking values and solving questions. That is the general approach taken by most students. You should not do that. This is the main approach that you should always follow for a quadratic inequality. Even if you do absolute inequalities later on or general inequality questions, number line is the best way to solve questions. Okay. Okay, guys, I can see it's clear to most of you. Those of you, about 10% I can see, were saying no. I think it's because of the number line, but I would suggest going through it. This is kind of re-emphasizing the fact that you should know your concepts. Without concepts, most of the DS questions you'll look tough. Guys, this is the last question for the day. So let's try and do this properly. And let's try to increase the accuracy as much as possible. So I'm adding the poll here. So all the best, guys. Let's try to end on a high note. I'll also be sharing the PDF, guys, so do wait after solving this question. There are 2 questions in that PDF that you can solve later on. So once you're done with this, do wait for the PDF. "45 seconds more, guys." Ideally, if you would have understood the percentage more less question, you should definitely get this one correct. Okay, 10 seconds and I'll end the poll. So those of you who haven't responded, please do so quickly. Keep in mind in GMAT, you'll have to mark an answer. I keep on telling this to people. So get used to the habit of, even if you don't know, taking an educated guess. At least you'll get to know if you're good at guessing or not. Okay, I'm ending the poll. Okay, about 57% of you think the answer should be A, and I have 35% of you think the answer should be C. A few D's also, but D obviously is not the answer in this case. So let's look at whether the answer is A or C. So notice in this case, it's a very simple question. They're telling us that Ryan is driving from city A to city B, which is 120 miles away from city A. Wait, let me just change the pen color once. Yeah. So city A to B. I usually draw a diagram. Might not be useful, but sometimes it helps me visualize. He drove the first D miles in TR. So he's driving D miles in TR, and the remaining 120 minus D miles in 0.75 TRs. Okay, that's fine. What I need to do is find out the average speed at which he drove 120 minus D miles. Okay, average speed at which he drove 120 minus D miles. So let me write down the speed. Keep in mind, average speed or speed is always total distance by total time. Okay, so if I'm trying to find out the speed with which he drove at 120 miles, I need to use the total distance, which is 120 minus D, and the total time that he took, which is 0.75 T. This is the speed with which he drove 120 minus D miles. Okay, this speed is what percent more. Okay, so let me do one thing. Let me write this as a variable. Let me write it as S2. Okay, let me write this as S1, S2. This S2 is what percent more than the average speed at which he drove the first D miles. So after reading this, I'll find out the first D miles is this speed. So the question is asking S2 is what percent more? So S2 minus S1. Now notice again, I told you that than tells you what needs to be in the denominator. Than the average speed at which he drove the first D miles. S2 minus S1 by S1. Okay, once again, if you want, you can simplify and write it as S2 by S1 minus 1, up to you. You know S2 is 120 minus D by 0.75 T. S1 is D by T minus 1 times 100. Now notice one thing very carefully. If you flip it, and I'm doing this again for this so that it's clear to everyone. Otherwise, you should be able to see directly that there are two division of fractions. So what will happen is this d by t will flip. Notice the t is getting cancelled out. And you're left with, finally, you're left with this 120 minus d by 0.75d minus 1 multiplied by 100. This is what I need to find out. Obviously, the d won't get cancelled out automatically, so I have to keep d with me. But after simplification, again, notice I'm spending time on my question, simplifying it, figuring out what I need, and then seeing, hey, what I need is just d. I don't need t at all. T is useless. So if I know the value of d, I will be able to get my answer. Now, when I go to the statement, I see d is equal to 40. I'll say this is sufficient. See, spending 10 seconds, 5 seconds, not more than that on each statement. T is equal to 4, not sufficient, because I don't need t. So the correct answer in this case is option A, which thankfully 65, 67% of you got it correct, which is good. But see, about still 30% of you fell for the C trap. 35% of you fell for the C trap in this case. So ask yourself this: why are you still making these mistakes? What's a major reason behind making these mistakes? Did you not know the concept? Number one. Or did you not do the analysis? Were you kind of lazy and said, hey, D is there, T is there, let me mark C as the answer? Or did you not do analysis properly? That's the second thing which I talked about. Analysis is important. Pre-analysis is definitely very important in DS. If you're not doing all of these stuff, then guys, you'll keep on making mistakes in in DS questions. Now I'm sharing the file with you, DS webinar PDF. Hopefully you should be able to see it at your end. There are two questions out there which you can use. Solve it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. You can write to us at support@gmathviz.com, guys. So if you related to this webinar, if you have any questions, obviously feel free to write to us. But in general, also, let's say if you want to work with us, if you like the webinar, and say if you are in your initial phase of preparation, and if you feel that you want to work with us, then I would strongly suggest write to us, and you can set up a call also with us.